In this video, we will further elaborate the scope of intentional injury, specifically the nature and background of domestic violence. It is expected that you will acquire additional knowledge that you can use to identify domestic violence and come up with a better judgment on how to address it. Let's start. From the previous discussion, we define what is intentional injuries. Intentional injuries happen when people bring harm to themselves or others on purpose. Different types of acts or situations may lead to the intentional injury. Even when people are locked down in their homes, violence still happens. Before we go deeper into our topic, let us check first your prior knowledge about the types of intentional injuries. Match column A to column B. You may pause the video to answer each item. 1. Attempt is when someone harms themselves with any intent to end their life. 2. An act that included physical assault, hitting, pushing, and shoving, sexual abuse, and verbal abuse. 3. An unwanted aggressive behavior. The behavior is repeated or in overtime. 4. A suicide attempt in which a person does not intend to die. 5. A pattern that makes you feel afraid, nervous, harassed, or in danger. It is when someone repeatedly contacts you and follows you. 6. Injuries resulting from violence. 7. Is taking away or forcefully moving a person against his or her will and holding him or her in unjust captivity. 8. Is the act of using force or threats to force people to have over their money or properties on favors. 9. Is a street-based group of young people who regard themselves and may be seen by others as a group that engages in a range of criminal activity and violence. 10. A group of people with similar backgrounds, occupations, interest, or tastes. Let us check your answers. Here are the answers. The term intentional injuries refers to injuries resulting from purposeful human action, whether directed at oneself or others. It also includes self-inflicted and interpersonal acts of violence intended to cause harm. It was divided into two: self-inflicted and assault. Suicide and parasuicide are intentional injuries that are self-inflicted, while the assault was committed by family, peers, and other groups of people. There are different types of intentional injuries. To know what are those, let us answer this activity. Directions. Inside each box is an example of action leading to intentional injury. Based on the given clues, arrange the jumbled letters to their correct arrangement to get the correct answer. An act of physical assault, sexual abuse, and verbal abuse. To hand over their money or properties. Holding a person in unjust captivity. Taking of one's own life. Forced sexual intercourse. You may pause this video to have time to answer each. Here are the answers. Did you got all the correct answers? If yes, then you are doing great. Let us discuss domestic violence, which is one of the types of intentional injuries. Domestic violence happens within the family or within other types of relationships where people live together, like spouse abuse, siblings hurting each other, or parents or maltreating their children. Domestic violence is a serious problem. It's important to pay attention and watch out for it. As a student, you can help prevent it, especially among your loved ones. If you see signs of domestic violence, it's your duty to speak up and get help from the right people. Be kind and caring to your family and others. Domestic violence is an act that includes physical assault, hitting, pushing, shoving, etc., sexual abuse, unwanted or forced sexual activity, and verbal abuse. These are behaviors that are used by one person in a relationship who tries to control the other. This may occur to partners who may be married or not married. They may be heterosexual or homosexual couples living together, separated, or dating. Domestic violence includes abuse in actions such as name-calling or put-downs, keeping a partner from contacting his or her family friend, withholding money or allowance or denying financial support, stopping a partner from getting or keeping a job, actual or threatened physical harm, sexual assault, stalking, and intimidation. Who are the possible victims of domestic violence? Anyone can be a victim or at risk of domestic violence, especially if their partner is very jealous and or spies on him or her, will not let him or her break off the relationship, hurts him or her in any way, is violent, or brags about hurting other people, puts him or her down or makes him or her feel bad, forces him or her to have sex or makes him or her afraid to say no to sex, abuses drugs or alcohol, pressures him or her to use drugs or alcohol, has a history of bad relationships and blames it on others. There are some children who experience domestic violence in their homes. Their parents may think that their children do not know about the violence, but most of the time, the children are aware of it. They can feel helpless, scared, and upset. Some of them blame themselves as they feel like the violence is their fault. Nevertheless, children in a violent home experience different problems as they grow up, and these problems do not go away on their own. They can be there even as the child gets older. Here are the excerpt from the Convention on the Rights of the Child hosted by the United Nations. Article 19. Protection from all forms of violence. Children have the right to be protected from being hurt and mistreated, physically or mentally. Governments should ensure that children are properly cared for and protect them from violence, abuse, and neglect by their parents, or anyone else who looks after them. In terms of discipline, the Convention does not specify what forms of punishment parents should use. However, any form of discipline involving violence is unacceptable. There are ways to discipline children that are effective in helping children learn about family and social expectations for their behavior, ones that are nonviolent, are appropriate to the child's level of development and take the best interests of the child into consideration. Article 34. Sexual exploitation. Government should protect children from all forms of sexual exploitation and abuse. Article 35. Abduction, sale, and trafficking. The government should take all measures possible to make sure that children are not abducted, sold, or trafficked. Let us have another activity. This is to come up with better judgment on how to address domestic violence. Directions: inside the circle, name or draw the face of the person you trusted the most. Then answer the following questions. Who would you tell if you were in the following situations and why? A. Verbally abused by a teacher. B. Physically abused by your parents. C. Sexually abused by your relatives. D. You are being bullied by your classmates. Write your answer on a separate paper. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, call emergency services immediately. In many countries, the number is 911. You can also contact a local domestic violence hotline or shelter for support and guidance on reporting the abuse. Remember, your safety is the top priority. I hope you learned something today. Thank you and see you on our next video.